Okay, I am moved over to the corner of Houston and Elm, and I want to quickly just show you a visual of the kill zone, or the beginning of the kill zone, and just how tight these quarters are. I'm looking straight ahead. I'm standing right in front of the Texas School Book Depository. What you're looking at is the records building. You can see it goes back. I showed you the back of it in an earlier video. And I want you to remember this records building. Now that is Houston. Okay, so he came up Houston. He comes to this intersection here where all these cars are turning. And he's going to turn onto Elm. Just like that white truck right there is turning onto Elm. You can see how sharp that turn is. It's a 120-degree turn. All these cars are making it. In other words, they're parked literally going very slow in front of this building. If somebody's in this building aiming a gun at the open top limo, they are a ripe target, a ripe juicy target. Right across the street, still on Houston, is another building. Now it's not known as the Daltech building today, but that's what it was called back then. It's the red brick. I showed you this in an earlier video from a distance. And again, if there's somebody in one of these windows high up, or possibly on the roof, looking down over this intersection right here where the car is slowed almost to stop to make that 120-degree turn, you have another perfect spot, perfect vantage point. Then if I turn around, you see this is the Texas School Book Depository. And I'm going to step out here a little bit. You can see up. There's the 6th floor window, and that is right here at the base overlooking this turn where this blue Suburban is making that 120-degree turn. So when you take these three buildings, the records building, the Daltech building, and the Texas School Book Depository, which is now known as the Dallas County Administration Building, and you have high vantage points, 6 floors up there. Who knows where the shooter was in the Daltech building? We know he was in there, but we don't know where. And then we know that there was a shooter in this building as well, all overlooking this intersection. Creates a really terrific vantage point for a field of operations if your goal is to take out somebody with a high-powered rifle. Now as I turn this direction and I follow these people walking down this sort of this back street that's behind, there's Elm Street, and it's going under the railroad bridge, but here's a little side street. It goes behind Elm Street to an area known as the Grassy Knoll. All right, that's where we're going. And this is the Texas School Book Depository. So you're just walking along here. I wanted to give you a layout there so you can see how tight these quarters are. And of course, this street feeds into a parking area behind the picket fence and behind the Grassy Knoll, which makes for perfect cover if you're behind the fence, and a perfect getaway if you've left your car or somebody's waiting for you in this parking area. You're both obstructed by the fence, nobody can see you from the front, and you have there were no barricades in those days. This was just an open parking area. City workers, railroad workers, Texas School Book Depository workers could park here. And here you see, as I come around the corner here, the beginning of the picket fence. And it feeds right up here into this parking area. Alright, so I wanted to show you all that. Now I'm going to turn and talk to you about the mechanics. And the mechanic, that's a sort of I don't know if it's a mafia term or an intelligence term, talking about the people who actually do the dirty work. But curiosity has always been, who shot the president? Who shot JFK? I believe if you get through all these videos, I believe at the end you'll have the name of the guy. I believe I know the name of the guy who actually killed the president. I also believe I know the names of the guys that were in those three buildings we just talked about. but we'll get to that. This guy, his name is Rosco White. Rosco White was a Dallas police officer. Not that long a Dallas police officer. He'd just been hired in September. And after his death in, I believe it was 72 or 73, I don't remember the exact year, his son was going through his things, his daughter and his son, and going through his things, and they found some pretty interesting things in a basically like a foot locker, which led to another discovery of a safety deposit box, which led to another discovery hidden away in the grandparents' attic in Paris, Texas, of some more documents and things. And when they put it all together, it paints a pretty amazing picture. And I'm going to take you through some of this evidence that you decide for yourself what you think. But one of the things they found in this later in this canister in their grandparents' attic in Paris, Texas, was 3 memos that their daddy, Rosco White, this Dallas police officer, had saved. He'd put them in plastic so that they would be preserved, and he saved them for the express purpose of somebody finding them after he died. He left all these clues where to look for this stuff, and all the memos were headed the same, and their footers were the same. And it was clear this was an ONI memo, all 3 of them. ONI is Office of Naval Intelligence. And they were all supposed to be destroyed. In fact, they had it written right on the bottom, destroy. Of course, he didn't destroy them, he kept them. ONI, now, I'm not going to get into Rosco White's background, but real quickly, he served in the Marine Corps at the same time Lee Harvey Oswald did. In fact, they went in the same boat to Asia to serve at Atsugi, served at Atsugi together, served in the same U-2 plane together, program together, and ended up in Dallas together. I mean, they are connected in so many different ways. It's just too long to get into that. I did a whole series of videos on Rosco White. You can watch those later, but both of them, clearly Lee Harvey Oswald was recruited into naval intelligence when he was in the Marine Corps, and as such became a member of the CIA, an active member of all these intelligence services bleed together. Well, according to these memos, so did Rosco White. And it kind of explains why they are joined at the hip, seemingly their entire lives. Anyway, this first memo that he saved was dated February 1963 and was addressed to Mandarin. That was the code name, and it had a military ID next to it. And the military ID number was Rosco White's number. So evidently Rosco White, in his function as an intelligence officer, had a code name, and it was Mandarin. And the subject reads as follows of the memo. It says, quote, "Foreign affairs assignments have been canceled. The next assignment is to eliminate a national security threat to worldwide peace. Destination will be Houston, Austin, or Dallas. Contacts are being arranged. Orders are subject to change at any time. Reply back if not understood." So then he finds us a second memo. This one's dated September 1963. Again, to Mandarin with Rosco White's military ID number. This time the subject reads, quote, "Dallas destination chosen. Your place hidden within the department. Contacts are within this letter. Continue on as planned." And it's interesting, in this second memo, dated 2 months before the assassination, his superiors in intelligence are indicating to him that they've chosen Dallas as the location for this next job, which is to eliminate a national security threat to worldwide peace. They've chosen Dallas. And they say to him, "Your place is hidden within the department." What happened in September of 63, at the time of this memo, that's when Rosco White got hired by the Dallas Police Department. This memo says your place is hidden within the department. So what we have here is a security asset of the CIA infiltrating the Dallas Police Department, and he is involved in or participating in or has knowledge of and is part of an operation, a secret operation, to take out or eliminate a national security threat to worldwide peace in Dallas. This is dated in September. Mary Haverstick, a lot of this information you can find in a book by Brian Edwards, Gary Shaw. It just came out this year. I think it's called Admitted Assassin. Another source you might check out is Mary Haverstick's book, A Woman I Know. I think it came out in 23, and she talks a lot about this CIA program called ZR Rifle. Now, everybody found out in the 70s that the CIA had an assassination program called Executive Action, and its targets were foreign heads of state, and they used foreign mercenaries. What a lot of people don't realize, but it did also come out during the same period, is that they also had another assassination program called ZR Rifle. Same people were involved in it. William Harvey was running it. The same people. It was all signed off on by Allen Dulles, signed off on both of them. Anyway, this distinction between ZR Rifle and Executive Action was that Executive Action was targeting foreign heads of state using foreign mercenaries. ZR Rifle was targeting American targets and using CIA or all agency assets. In other words, American citizens targeting American targets. And Mary Haverstick painstakingly went through all these documents and found code names. They always use code names. The book's called A Woman I Know. And the code names indicate, first, the base of operations. Code name Germany, she figured out what Germany meant. It was Texas. And it was during this period of time. This program started 5 months after JFK became president, right after Bay of Pigs, and terminated 5 months after his assassination. And she was able to determine that the code name for this operation was Germany, Texas, and the field of operation where this event would take place was code name, quote, Baden-Baden, which is named after a town in Germany with the hyphen and everything. And that, she found, meant Dallas-Fort Worth. It even has a hyphen in it. And ZR Rifle, clearly, if you look at the dates when it began and when it ended, the target is clear. You know, these national security folks, the CIA and intelligence and military, who thought in their view that JFK was not up to the task, and Bay of Pigs was proof of that, literally right on the heels of that. And of course, this is right before he fires the top 3 guys at the CIA. They launched this ZR Rifle to take him out. And you follow, and you have to read the book to get all the details, but you follow it forward, and there's training of an S-force on a triangulated, they call it the triangular fire squad, hitting a moving target from distance, using high-powered rifles and scopes, teams of assassins in 3 locations, pushing some of them are diversionary shots, some are pushing the target into the kill shot. All this training is taking place under the cover during this period of using this assassination team to kill Castro. But how hard would it be to turn this assassination team and use the same training, the same methods and everything, instead of killing Castro, which was convenient cover, they go to where their base of operations is Texas, their field of operations, which is Dallas, and they take out JFK instead. Right? ZR Rifle is an American target. Castro's not an American target. And so anyway, you see people moving into place in the months before the assassination. Handlers, like Ruth Payne and her husband, who turned out to be Lee Harvey Oswald's handlers, getting cover jobs at Bell Helicopter, which is right on the outskirts of Dallas. Remember, Dallas is the field of operations. Dallas-Fort Worth, Baden-Baden. Rosco White, this Dallas police officer, who's getting these ONI memos talking about where this operation is going to take place in Dallas. Purpose is to eliminate a threat to worldwide peace, right? He gets a cover job with the Dallas police in September. Then their Patsy, the guy they've set up and sheeped it painstakingly all through the summer months at New Orleans and will continue in the lead up to the assassination here in Dallas. Their Patsy gets a job in October at the Texas School Book Depository, which at the time, the motorcade route is not scheduled to go by the Texas School Book Depository. But in short order, it will be, because it'll be changed the night before, and it'll run that motorcade right under his workstation. And if he's the patsy being set up to take the fall, he works on the 6th floor. It's just perfect. Later, they also found a scrapbook in his belongings, Rosco White, after he died. And in the scrapbook, he had handwritten, and it was their father's handwriting, these captions. And in one of the captions, he had a picture of Dealey Plaza and the president in the fatal shot, the famous shot as it passed by the grassy knoll. And underneath, he'd written a caption, quote, "Mandarin kills K." Now, we've already learned that Mandarin is Rosco White. According to the ONI memo in the military ID, they addressed this memo to Mandarin, and they put Rosco White's military ID next to him. He writes, quote, "Mandarin kills K," which is Kennedy, uses a 7.65 German Mauser in assassination. And he's specific about who did it and what gun he used. He also, in that same caption, or in that same photo, he included a red X and a black dot marking the spot where he took the fatal shot. And that red X and black dot is right where I'm standing. I'm going to turn the camera around. I'm going to let you see this is the picket fence. We came in from that direction, and here's the picket fence. Now here's where it angles, runs along, all the way along out to the railroad yard there along Houston. And the red dot and the black box, this is where he was standing, and this is his view. Now, if you can see, there is an X in the middle lane of Elm Street. That is where the president was fatally shot. And I am standing right here behind this stockade fence with an unobstructed view. When you put a scope on a gun and you fire at this close range, this is 50 feet. It's a turkey shoot. And according to him, this is where he was standing. According to his caption that he wrote in his scrapbook. And so, but it gets better, because Rosco White also included a confession in his diary. They found in his footlocker a diary. So they found a scrapbook. They found these 3 memos. I've talked to you about 2 of the memos so far. I'm saving the 3rd memo for a minute. They also found a diary. And by this point, his kids are really curious. You know, they're reading all this. They're seeing all this as seemingly all this stuff that their daddy left them. None of it's personal. It's all about the JFK assassination. So they flip in the diary. It was noted it was a daily diary. So they went to 11/22/63. And in the daddy's same, Rosco White's same handwriting, he had written a confession. Quote, 11/22/63. Lebanon is in the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository. Lebanon is another code word. Saul was in the records building, another code word. Mandarin, Rosco White, was behind the stockade fence. Shots fired from the upper buildings were for diversionary purposes. And I'll stop there. I'm going to read the rest of the confession here in a minute. But that puts the shooters in the buildings. He is saying he's part of an assassination team, a 3-man assassination team at the very minimum. More than that, because they always had spotters. But Lebanon, whoever Lebanon is in the Texas School Book Depository. Saul was in the records building, and Mandarin was behind a stockade fence. So we know 3 locations, and we know 3 code names, and we know one of the code names who the person is. It's Rosco White. We'll find out the other 2 here shortly. This fits right within the triangular fires, which is nicknamed the S-Force. And that's a whole nother topic, but this S-Force that was put together, this assassination team trained in Mexico, to create a kill zone between 3 high-powered rifles with scopes hitting a moving target from distance. That's exactly what happened in Dallas. And that's the training that the S-Force has been receiving since 1960. And of course, we know that this ZR rifle started 5 months after Kennedy became president and shut down 5 months after he was killed. All right, that brings us to the third ONI memo. Remember, they'd found 3 memos. We've read the first 2. The second one was interesting. It said Dallas was the site chosen, and your place is hidden within the department. He promptly goes out and gets a job at the Dallas Police Department. This one is dated December 1963, again to Mandarin, with Rosco White's military ID. This is 1 month after the assassination. The subject reads, quote, "Stay within the department, Dallas Police. Witnesses have eyes, ears, and mouths. You know what to do of the mix-up. The men will be in to cover all the misleading evidence soon. Stay as planned. Wait for further orders." Wait for further orders. Lots in this this memo. Wouldn't have meant a lot in 63 or even 74, 2 or 3 whenever they read it first. It means a lot now because we've got all kinds of other evidence to put with it. Stay within the department means stay within the Dallas Police Department. Your cover is good there, and you can help us. You'll be useful to eliminating these witnesses who have eyes, ears, and mouths. And of course, almost immediately, witnesses begin dying. Witnesses who are inconvenient to the narrative. And then the next part is interesting. It says, you know what to do of the mix-up. The mix-up is speaking about what happened with J.D. Tippit. And Rosco White talks about that, how he had to kill in the aftermath, and I'll read this to you, but he had to kill an officer, a Dallas police officer at 10th and Patton. Well, that's the site where, that is the exact location where J.D. Tippit was killed. They blamed it on Oswald. But Rosco is saying, in my effort to get away, Tippit became a loose end. I had to take him out. It wasn't planned. It wasn't intentional. It's just how it worked out. That's the mix-up. And they're saying to him, you know what to do of the mix-up. In other words, keep quiet. Don't worry about it. The men will be in to cover all the misleading evidence soon. Stay as planned. Wait for further orders. In other words, his bosses in intelligence are telling him, stay in the department. Don't worry about the mix-up. We got people coming and we're going to take care of that. And you did what you had to do. And it explains so much about the assassination and also the subsequent killing of Tippit, both of which were blamed on the patsy. Turns out Rosco White, in his own words at least, did it. Now there's a question, is he making all this up? Because people, you know, even though he's dead, had no purpose to make it up now, could he have been making this up? Is there any corroborating witnesses or testimony? Well, Rosco White's wife, her name is Geneva White, testified later that when Rosco, her husband, left for work that morning, he was dressed in civilian clothes, but he had with him on a hanger his police uniform. And now remember that's going to come into play here shortly, okay? It might not mean anything to you right now, but she's saying that he had his uniform with him. And Bobby Hargis, a Dallas police cop, one of the 4 who was lucky enough to ride along and behind JFK's limo, was to the left rear of JFK's limo. When the shots came, he was looking directly at the shooter up on the grassy knoll. He was looking back towards the grassy knoll, up in that direction. And of course, the shot, which is coming directly in, he's directly in the line of fire. And when the shot hits Kennedy's head, it splatters brain and blood and skull fragments all over the back of rear of the trunk, left side of the trunk, and all over Bobby Hargis's helmet, visor, and the shield on the front of his bike. And he immediately suspected that the shots came from behind this fence up on the grassy knoll. He parked his bike, ran across Elm Street, up the grassy knoll, and behind the picket fence, where he encountered, according to his own testimony later, Rosco White. Now, how would he know it was Rosco White? Well, he's a Dallas police officer, and Rosco White is a Dallas police officer. And he said Rosco White was in his Dallas Police Department uniform. And when he asked him what he was doing there, Rosco White told him, quote, "I'm looking for the shooter like everybody else." And Hargis gave him the benefit of the doubt. Who wouldn't? He's a cop. But this helps explain how somebody like Rosco White, who left his house in a civilian uniform, or civilian clothes, probably on purpose as cover, But his wife saw that he was carrying his uniform on a hanger, and the first person Bobby Hargis sees behind the picket fence after the shooting is Rosco White, and he's wearing his police uniform. It all makes sense when you know that his wife said, well, he took his police uniform with him. And that would give him perfect cover to be behind the picket fence, because this was a restricted area on the day of the motorcade. But if you're a police uniform, you got a badge, no one's going to question you, right? So you have the corroboration of Bobby Hargis saying, hey, in the immediate aftermath of the shooting, Rosco White was there. I know, I saw him, I talked to him. There's another witness. Her name was Beverly Oliver. Beverly Oliver was on the infield grass looking back, just like Bobby Hargis, towards or in the direction of the grassy knoll. And when the shooting happened, she was directly in line of fire, just like Hargis was, and she suspected immediately that the shooting came from across behind a picket fence. And she said, of course, after the traffic passed, she ran in that direction as well. And she said that she saw Geneva's husband. This is a quote. I saw, quote, Geneva's husband without a hat and a gun belt walking down the steps from the picket fence. You said, well, how did she know who Geneva White was and her husband was? Well, Beverly Oliver was she worked at the Colony Club. The Colony Club was right next door to the Carousel Club. Geneva White, Roscoe's wife, worked at the Carousel Club. She was a cigarette girl, a hostess. She wasn't a stripper, she was a hostess. And Beverly Oliver worked next door at the Colony Club. And as such, she went back and forth and to the Carousel Club to hang out with Geneva White, and Geneva White would sometimes come to the Colony Club and hang out with Beverly Oliver. They were friends. They were friends. And as such, she'd been at the Carousel many times when Jack Ruby came to her table, and of course Jack Ruby was friends with Rosco White. Talk about that in some of my earlier videos. They were tight. And I mean, even up to and including the fact that Jack Ruby ate at their house on several occasions, and Rosco White's son and daughter remember it. They played with his dog. They were friends. And so they all hung out and ate at the same table. It'd be Jack Ruby, it'd be Rosco White, it'd be Geneva, and it would be Beverly Oliver. And she said, according to her testimony later, Lee Harvey Oswald ate with them on occasion. And J.D. Tippit ate with them. They're all together. They were all friends. They all knew each other. They were all sort of birds of the same feather, for lack of a better word. Anyway, so when she comes up this grassy knoll and she encounters Rosco White coming down the steps, but let me take you over here and show you the steps. I am behind the picket fence right now, and I'm looking out. Let me turn the camera around. Looking out over Elm. So this is the view from behind the picket fence as I walk my way back to the corner where Rosco White was standing. And you can see how close Elm Street is. What a perfect vantage point. All right, here are the steps. So what Beverly said is that Rosco ran around the corner of this fence, and he ran down this sidewalk and to these steps, ran down the steps down to the curb. And she says later he jumped in a car right down there. But she was across the street in the infield, kind of where that guy is, and she ran across and she saw Rosco running down these steps, and she recognized him. She said, that's Geneva White's, she didn't identify him by Rosco, she identified him by Geneva White's husband. So what you see here is he does have corroborating testimony. And I'm going to talk later about the man who was, I'm going to turn my camera on, who was working in that railroad tower right there. That railroad tower is staring straight at me. I am directly in front of it. It sees everything. And of course it's high up, it's got a good vantage point. It sees this entire parking area and all this area behind the fence. The train station, the tracks, the box cars, all the cars that are parked here, and anybody who is walking around in this parking area, anyone who is in this vicinity. The man in that working that shift that day is switching the tracks. Whoever is in that staring out those windows is going to see everything that's going on back here. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to talk about what he saw. And also there was a man walking out a little bit. He was standing down at the end, a little bit past that white vehicle, that Cadillac right there. I'm going to walk out so you can see it. And he is a witness as well, because he could see down the fence line, as I'm fanning my camera, he could see down this whole fence line. He was standing there watching the motorcade from up top on the bridge. He could see his testimony and the testimony of the man in that switching station, or that railroad tower, are going to also corroborate what Beverly Oliver said she saw, what Bobby Hargis said she saw, and what Rosco White said he did. So yes, there is more testimony other than what Rosco White wrote in his confession, other than what he said in his scrapbook with his captions. There's Beverly White's testimony, there's Bobby Hargis's testimony, and there's the man in this railroad tower, and there's the man who's watching the motorcade down here on the railroad bridge. But we'll get to them in a minute. All those are corroborations of the White story. Okay, and so it's interesting. This is not the only time. By the way, what you end up with this Rosco White story is, when you take into consideration these other two witnesses, you have a written confession in a diary, you have 3 written confessions in his scrapbooks, you have 2 corroborating witnesses, Beverly Oliver, Bobby Hargis, who personally saw him and talked with him. You have 2 more corroborating witnesses who saw from a distance, right? And then, so it paints a pretty clear picture that what Rosco White is saying is true. It's just corroboration upon corroboration. Now, we didn't hear about this story until about 1990 when his son had it published. It's a pretty awful thing to find out that your dad was the assassin who killed JFK. So he kept it quiet for a long time. He was seeking evidence. He also confronted his mom, Geneva White, and she was older, and he confronted her, and she broke down, cried, and said it was true. So that wouldn't be something useful in court, but that's just another layer of corroboration that everything that they're reading in this scrapbook and in this diary is true. So what you have here is a story that isn't the only story of someone claiming to be the shooter behind the picket fence. Now, I wanted, and we'll get to that in just a second, but I told you I would read the rest of his confession. Okay, I saved it for the end, and the rest of his confession reads like this. This is Rosco White writing. He says, quote, Mandarin himself, target open, shot from front, from fence, definite hit. And then he continues to what happens next. He says, gun is retrieved by man to the side, probably his spotter, who took it to the rail car area, whirled over fence, took man down to protect myself, ran around the back of fence, down the embankment to the car. So what he's saying is there's another guy with him. He disassembled the weapon after Rosco White handed it to him, put it in a bag, and he escaped literally. I'm going to show you. Here's where they're standing, and he ran along the fence line to the rail cars, which were parked on the rail lines right there on the rail bridge. That's his accomplice. And then according to his own words, he turned, and here he is standing behind the fence, he turned and ran out and around this side of the fence, and according to his own words, he did exactly what Beverly Oliver said. He ran down that sidewalk, down those steps to the car. On the way, Beverly Oliver saw him. On the way, fronted by Bobby Hargis, and all those stories line up. And he's writing this long, and he's dead and gone when they're reading this. He's writing this in the aftermath of the assassination. This is in 1963. He died in 71. A lot of this evidence didn't come out until 1990 when his son made it public. And we were able to corroborate it with all these other stories. But for years we had Beverly Oliver's story. For years we had Bobby Hargis' story. For years we had that tower right there. His name is Lee Bowers. We had his story. For years, we had the story of the guy who was standing down there at the end of that fence line watching the motorcade go by. We had his story. His name is Ed Hoffman. But we couldn't put the pieces together because we didn't Rosco White's story. Now we do. And it's like puzzle pieces coming together. And again, I started off by saying he's not the only guy that is going to claim to be the shooter. He's just the one that makes the most sense. We've had, for example, James Files. I'm just going to go over these alternate in this camera background, who said he was standing at that position that he shot the president. He was a mob hitman for the Chicago crime family. His boss was Charles Nicoletti, whom he said was in the records building. Hold on to that name, it's going to come up again. And that they had been ordered by their boss, Sam Giancana, to come down and hit the president. He said this is where he was standing. And he was in prison when he told this story. And he said that as evidence, he said, I did something stupid. I was young and cocky. I liked the taste of gunpowder, and so I would suck on my bullets. And he said, I took out a bullet that had been in my mouth, and I bit down on that bullet and left my teeth marked. This was sort of his calling card whenever he killed somebody. And he would leave that bullet on top of the person's body so everybody knew who did it. And he said, I don't know why I did it here. It was stupid. But I took that bullet after it had been in my mouth. I bit down on it, left teeth marked, and I set it on top of the stockade fence. I fully intended to remember to grab it on my way out, but I left it there. I was in such a hurry to leave, I left it there. Years later, after he told this story, a University of Texas researcher came to this location. He'd heard the story, and he brought with him a metal detector. And he went along the grassy knoll in this area in front of the fence, and he found that bullet. And he sent it to a dental research facility, or somebody does dental examinations, whatever. They did some work on it, and they found teeth mark on it. And this was James Files, who says, I was the guy. But when they asked him repeatedly, was there another guy with you? He said no. And that became a troublesome little fact, because all the other witnesses, at least the witness in that railroad bridge and the witness down at the end of this fence line, said there was a second guy that ran off towards the rail yard, and the first guy, the shooter, actually ran around the fence down the front. They left in opposite directions. And yet James Files said, no, I was there by myself. So that's never been reconciled, right? Now, the fact that he mentioned Charles Nicoletti is going to come in to play here in a minute, and that corroborates his story a little bit. But the fact that he was alone is a problem. The other thing is no other witnesses saw him. Rosco White had all kinds of witnesses that saw him, right? And he confessed to this on his own. In Rosco White's case, he did confess to it on his own multiple times, but other witnesses corroborated it and said essentially the same story. Another guy mentioned as the possible assassin behind this picket fence was a French assassin named Lucien Sarti. This was brought up in the late 80s, early 90s in a television series called The Men Who Killed Kennedy by Nigel Turner. He had talked to somebody in a European jail who said, I know who killed Kennedy. It was this French assassin named Lucien. And Lucien Sarti never confessed to it, but he was accused of it. And then later, when E. Howard Hunt died and confessed that he had been in Dallas as part of the plot to kill the president, and he wrote out a flow chart indicating that the man on the grassy knoll behind the picket fence was a French assassin, Sarti. So there's two people who have said that it was a French assassin named Lucien Sarti. Again, no corroboration and no confession by the individual, but accusations by others. So in one case, Rosco White has confessed multiple times, but also is corroborated by other people. In all the other cases, it's either a confession by the individual himself or an accusation by somebody else, but none of it could be corroborated. Another one is Charles Harrelson. Charles Harrelson, the Woody Harrelson's dad, some people accuse him of being behind the picket fence, and he actually even said so, and later claimed Woody doesn't believe it. Woody believes that he did what he originally said he did. He brought Secret Service badges to the real shooters and the real spotters, and then he exaggerated his role in the assassination afterwards. But his name has been floated. Another one is Mac Wallace, LBJ's personal hitman. We know he was in Dealey Plaza because his 34-point match fingerprint was found in the sniper's nest of the Texas School Book Depository. So we know at least he was there. He had no reason to be there. He didn't work there. Oswald had fingerprints there too, but he had reason to have fingerprints there because he worked there. He moved boxes around. Why was Mac Wallace in the sniper's nest? Mac Wallace never claimed to have been the shooter behind the picket fence, but some of the LBJ attorneys who had knowledge of all LBJ's shenanigans said that Mac Wallace was the shooter behind the picket fence. His attorney, Cliff Carter, another attorney named Bar McClellan, both claimed that, and they both told Billy Solestis. Billy Solestis later put it in writing to a judge when he was confessing to all the crimes he knew of and had personally committed, been involved in. And of course he was friends with all these people. He was in deep with all of them, and so he was telling what he knew. And he said Mac Wallace killed these individuals, these people, and the last one in the list was JFK. But again, Mac Wallace didn't admit to that, and Mac Wallace, there's no corroboration of it other than the corroboration that he was actually in the sniper's nest. There's a fingerprint to prove it. So when you take all that in total, the guy, I think, killed the president, and of course it wasn't his decision. He was just a mechanic. He was an operator, and was the one standing location right behind the picket fence looking down on that that X spot was actually Rosco White, a Dallas Police Department officer who had on his uniform and his badge and obviously his sidearm, and was able to walk away afterwards after handing the weapon to his accomplice, to his spotter, who ran off in the opposite direction. And Rosco left out the front, got in a car down on Elm Street, and was seen and approached and talked to by Bobby Hargis, by Beverly Oliver, and was also viewed and with corroborating testimony from Lee Bowers in the railroad tower and Ed Hoffman at the end of this fence line. There's just too much evidence. And of course his wife had already said that he left that morning with his police uniform. So it wasn't like he couldn't have done it because he didn't have his uniform that day. He did. He just didn't wear it out the door. And in the morning, he was wearing his civilian clothes, but he must have changed because everybody saw him afterwards. 2 people saw him, knew exactly who he was. He was wearing his police uniform, and he was behind the picket fence moments after the shooting. So I'm going to add to this as we go. I'll to you the story of Rosco White, compare it with the alternative theories, and give you the corroborating testimony. And I'm going to, or at least the names of the corroborators, and I'm going to give you their testimony here shortly. But that's enough for Rosco White in this video. Thank you.